today, he said he would focus on economic recovery, and that will be a Herculean task. The IMF calls Zimbabwe's economy one of the most fragile in the world, and with elections due to be held in the next 8 months, progress made by the new government will soon be put to the test of the people. Please welcome the new president of Zimbabwe, Mr. Emmerson Mnangagwa.
Thank you.
Mr. President, let's begin with that task of economic recovery, the task that's brought you to Davos. What is the message that you are delivering here?
Well, as you say, today is my 60th day, making it 2 months in office. On my day of inauguration, I mentioned that economics, trade cooperation would be priority to the new order in Zimbabwe, rather than politics as a priority. This is what we are going to do. In Zimbabwe, in order to catch up with the region, you know, I'm sure you're aware that Zimbabwe is lagged behind in many areas as a result of isolation for the past 16 or 18 years of our history. Now, we are saying to the world, Zimbabwe is now open for business. To do so, it is necessary that we look at all the legislation which we have, which has been constraining business coming into Zimbabwe, so that there's ease of business, doing business in Zimbabwe. That is from the perspective of investors coming to Zimbabwe.
And there's one key piece of legislation that's been controversial, and that was the indigenization law that limited the stake that foreign investors could take in Zimbabwean companies, that black Zimbabweans had to hold 51%. So is that law now going to be repealed?
It's true. We introduced, as part of the administration throughout, the old administration, it is true, we had the Indigenization Act, whereby an investor coming into Zimbabwe, we had 3 categories of resources. We had the depletable and extractive resources, which required that an investor, when you come to Zimbabwe, you land at the airport, you already know that 51% belongs to us, and you remain with 49%. Then with the non-extractive, non-depleted resources, that was open for investors to come in. And the last category was that of the indigenous people, reserved sector. The sector is like retail business, small businesses, which was reserved for our people. But now, with regard to the first one, the issue of depletable or extractive resources, under my administration, we have limited that to only 2 minerals. That is diamonds as well as platinum. The reason is that we do not have a comprehensive diamond policy, which we are working on by talking to already established economies who have a diamond policy in our region or perhaps beyond.
So in all other industries, what size of stakes could foreign investors hold in the future?
The rest, you negotiate. You come in if you want to have a partner. If you don't want to have a partner, it's open business, except in those 2 areas. Okay. You can come in for lithium, you can come in for gold, you can come in for chrome, you can come in for coal, you can come in any other mineral, tin, copper. It's now open,
okay,
except those 2.
You said that you need to correct the economic situation that Zimbabwe's found itself in, and you pointed to international isolation. You would acknowledge, would you not, that it is also bad decisions from the government of Zimbabwe over many years, a government, you know, a ruling party in which you've been a key figure for many years, that has made those decisions?
That is correct. This is why we say, going into the future, we would want to embrace the international community. We also want the international community to embrace us. And to do so, we must look at what is necessary to be done in order for the international community to accept us. in order for the international community to say, today Zimbabwe is suitable for the investment, is ready for investment. So we must look at the constraints which investors were saying, these are the things that determine their bringing capital into any destination. As you are aware that capital can go only where it feels comfortable. Why was it not feeling comfortable before in Zimbabwe? So we must address those issues.
Yes. Well, how would you answer that question? Because you were Mr. Mugabe's vice president. Before that, you were Speaker of Parliament.
And many more other positions in his government. But as I say, from the time we introduced land reform, this is the time we had this isolation. But as you are aware, we could not stop our land reform because we went to a very bitter liberation armed struggle in order to get our land back from the colonialists at the time. So when we became independent, yes, of course, at Lancaster, the then British government, I must say, whenever Britain has led the Prime Minister, Zimbabwe enjoys the relationship. Currently with Theresa May, I can assure you, within 1 hour of my inauguration, there was an envoy from Theresa May saying they were ready to cooperate with us. But let me go back to your question. So in 1979, when we had our Lancaster conference, the British and Americans assured us that they will provide funding which we would use in the process of land reform on a basis of willing seller, willing buyer. But when Prime Minister Tony Blair came in, he abrogated that relationship. But we said whether there's British money or there's no British money, we'll proceed to correct the imbalance of land position, because at the time, 1% of the population owned 70% of the land, and 99% of the population owned 30% of the land.
And I understand that the principle of land ownership is really important. It was particularly important in that post-colonial era of independence which you're describing. But there's no doubt that the way that the white-owned farms were seized had huge implications, not only for the people whose land it was, who owned that land, but for many of the black farm workers, and indeed for Zimbabweans in general, because not long afterwards the food crisis began. And you still have a situation where as many as a third of Zimbabwean children are malnourished. So what do you say now to those white farmers? Do you need them back in order to get the full potential out of the land?
You are correct to say at the time of independence, actually Zimbabwe was a food basket of the region. We had to make a decision that we remain without our land and have the little minority cultivate the land and keep the title of being a food basket of the region, or take our land and use it productively until we become a food basket of the region. And I can assure you, the last 3 years, including last year, we now have food surplus since last season. And I have no doubt with the model of agriculture we have introduced now, we should be able to produce enough grain for ourselves, whether there's drought and there's no drought, because we have created water bodies throughout the country, and with support from Spain, support from Brazil, support from Belarus, we are bringing lots of irrigation equipment.
Well, the World Food Programme said that even last year there were 4 million Zimbabweans who were food insecure.
I am saying the last season, it is possible. In fact, the last 2 decades, we had food deficiency.
So what is the position?
Country.
What is the position on the white farmers then? Because some have come back and some have been welcomed back. Do you want them back? Will they get their land back, or will they be compensated?
The new administration, we don't want to think on racial lines. that there are white farmers and black farmers. That should be a philosophy of the past.
Okay, so farmers who own their
Farmers
land.
are farmers. We have lots of former commercial farmers who have happily integrated into our system by accepting to have their farms reduced or downsized in terms of our ecological regions. We have 5 of them, and each ecological region has a maximum farm size. And those who have accepted have remained, and they're participating in our agricultural production and development. And we value their skills, absolutely. But at the end of the day, even the African farmer must also be trained, must be supported, must be capacitated by government. It's a deliberate policy we are making. As I've just mentioned, that since last season, we now have food surplus. The consumption of grain in our country is about 1.5 million metric tons per year, but this time of nearly 3 million metric tons, which means that the 1.5 plus 500,000 metric tons for strategic reserve, that makes 2 million metric tons of grain. The balance above that is now available for export. And we also now know, under the current model, that we need X amount of hectarage in Zimbabwe under grain so that we get the amount of grain which we want. And in this particular instance, we need 400,000 hectares of land under what we call command agriculture. And those who voluntarily enter the program, we supply them with the 5 requirements for their piece of land they will have put on the program. That is, they will have seed, fertilizer, chemicals.
Mr. President, you clearly have big plans for the future, and you're at the start of your presidency. But I think it's really important to talk about the past, both because of what Zimbabwe's been through and because you have been a leading light in the ruling party for almost all your life. What would you say then? Let's address one particular phase in Zimbabwe's history, and that was the period in the early 1980s when you were in charge of state security and when terrible massacres took place in Matabeleland. Do you acknowledge that you were in a position of power when those massacres took place?
I was Minister for National Security, that's National Intelligence. That is correct. We are not saying the past must be thrown away from history. It has happened, it is there. Currently, just a week ago, I have signed a bill, the National Healing and Reconciliation Bill. I have signed it into an act, and I've signed one of my vice presidents to deal with that one, so that the communities that were affected can air their grievances and challenges, and government, with recommendations from that commission, we should be able to address those issues that are...
Is it going to be a Truth and Reconciliation Commission?
It's not called a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It's called a National Healing and Peace Commission.
Okay.
Yes.
And will you be appearing before it?
No, they themselves are going to the communities that are affected. If they ask me to come for any reason, I will.
Okay, but then what would you like to say now, 2 months into your presidency, what would you like to say now about how you feel about that time and how you feel about having been in a position of power when as many as 20,000 people were killed in Matabeleland?
I understand that those are the figures that are being flighted, but on the ground, I don't think that is the correct figure being flighted in that area. The most important thing is that what has happened has happened. What can we do about the past? We have put up a commission to deal with that issue. That should not stop us to have a better future, where all the communities should be united, should cooperate, should love each other, should work together. This is the message which we have. We are more worried now about how, in the future, we should have a united Zimbabwe.
The figure of 20,000 deaths came from the Catholic Commission for Justice and Peace. You could just apologize for what happened at that point, and that would be a powerful signal that Zimbabwe is truly moving into an era where it has acknowledged the past properly.
In my view, there's nothing more than me putting legislation where a commission headed by a vice president and most eminent persons in Zimbabwe to deal with that issue and make recommendations. At the time in 1987, my former president and the president of ZAPU, the late Vice President Joshua Nkomo, came together and cobbled out a unity accord which ended that conflict.
Yes, but I'm asking you, because you've taken over from Mr. Mugabe after 37 years, what is it that stops you saying the words, I'm sorry for what happened in that time, in a way that presidents, prime ministers have apologized for things that happened even many decades before they were in power, as a way of having a proper reckoning with the past?
Let me assure you, just recently I had a meeting with the chiefs from Matabeleland, discussed with them. It is them, because I feel there's that bad page in our history, and we would want to correct it. We would want to say, wherever a wrong was committed, right, we must say the government of the day must apologize. Wherever a community had suffered any injury, if it is possible to have that injury repaired, we do it. So, as a community, as a government, and as traditional leaders, we have agreed on how to deal with that issue. And I'm happy that quickly, within the last 30 days or so, I've been able to put forward the legislation which I signed last week.
Okay. Is it possible then that you will say sorry in the future after the commission
My
you're talking
dear,
about in Zimbabwe has reached a conclusion?
My dear, my people and myself are determined to make sure that the commissions of the past, the commission or the acts of commission, acts of omission or commission in the past, we have to interrogate them. Where the government of the day was wrong, we point out that that was wrong. Where the government of the day was correct, we should say so. And we have put up a machinery to achieve that. I don't know what your problem is, but this is how I'm dealing with the situation.
Okay, let's talk about the political process of the future and the political process of the future. Elections are due to take place before September this year. Will they take place in that time frame?
I don't know who gave you the month of September. In my own view, we want to consolidate and deepen constitutionalism in Zimbabwe. And in terms of our current constitution, every 5 years we are required to submit ourselves to seek a new mandate. So the 5-year term ends in July. The constitution allows us to have elections even 6 months before the last date in July. Because of the introduction of the BVR, a new system of voting which we are introducing, which is ending, I think, on the 12th of February next month. After the 12th of February next month, I'll be able to make a proclamation of elections. So I believe that elections will not be in July. They'll be earlier than July.
Earlier than July this year. So within the next few months, elections will take place in Zimbabwe.
Correct, yes.
And you have said that you will allow in EU monitors and UN monitors?
I have said that this time around, Zimbabwe is open and transparent. We want to have free, fair, credible elections, free of violence. If you have that criteria, why would you want to deny international observers coming to our country? Obviously, like in the past, SADC, whether it is political parties in the SADC, whether it's government, whether it's parliament, it's automatic. They come. This is what we, an understanding which is there between ourselves. The same with the continental body, that is the AU, they can observe. But this time I've gone further and said the EU, if they want to observe our elections, I'll welcome them. Other nations outside the EU who want to observe our elections, let them apply.
And will those, wherever they've come from, those outside monitors or observer missions, will they have free and unfettered access? Will they be able to go wherever they want and look at whatever they want?
I'm not an English expert, but I thought when you say it will be transparent, it means they have access. Unless the meaning of transparent means something different. But this is how I understand it, that we are going to have transparent elections, free and fair.
And can you also guarantee that there will be no intimidation of opposition rallies, of opposition supporters, that their meetings, their gatherings will be able to take place in complete freedom and without any interference?
The word you have used, guarantee, let me explain. So far, the leaders of my party, the leaders of the opposition leaders who are there, were all agreed that we need a non-violent general election. But I don't think those who commit violence make an application first that they are going to commit or assault somebody. But we as political party leaders, we must preach peace, non-violence. All of us as political parties, that's what we're going to do. For instance, I'm sure you're a Christian too, the Bible is 10 commandments. Many people know about 10 commandments, but they still commit some of the crimes which are forbidden by the 10 commandments.
Okay. A few specific questions. Will you set up a new independent election commission as part of that process of preparing for those next elections?
We already have the ZEC, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. It's one of the 5 independent commissions. It's already in place. It is the one. In the past, when we got independent, we used to have the government running elections. But this is not consonant with international practice. You would want to have elections run by an independent body, not by government. So this is what we have done. Okay.
And will Zimbabweans outside the country be allowed to register to vote?
Totally. Anybody who is above the age of 18 in Zimbabwe and is a citizen, in some instances, other classes may vote depending on how your class of residence is classified. But if you're a citizen, you're allowed to vote in these elections, as long as you're 18.
And if ZANU-PF lose power in these elections, will you hand over to the opposition?
You remember we had a constitutional referendum where ZANU-PF lost. And immediately the results were out, we said we abide by the results. We are very clear. The purpose of an election is to have the electorate select a team of a team of persons whom they think addresses their challenges and their needs. If we lose elections, that's it. Whichever party wins the election will proceed to take the reins of power, because they will have appealed to the electorate perhaps with the better policies and so on. But I've been leader of government business for many years in Parliament, and I've been benefiting a lot from the opposition making criticisms, and every constructive criticism they make, I take it on board. And this is why we are continuing in power, because we take the complaints of the opposition and implement.
Let's talk about Zimbabwe's relations with other countries. Let's talk about Zimbabwe's relations with other countries. Now, President Trump is on his way to Davos. I wonder what you thought when you heard his reported comments about some African countries being shitholes.
Yes, I have my foreign minister somewhere here. He informed me about that, but he also told me that he has since denied. Nonetheless, we as SADC are a bloc, and also the continental bloc, that is the AU. I'm informed by my Minister of Foreign Affairs that the AU made a statement representing us all. Also, SADC made their statement representing us all.
Would it affect how you interact with President Trump in the future?
Pardon?
Would it affect how you interact with President Trump in the future?
Look, this is why I say even those who were against us in the past, Zimbabwe is now open. To me, there shouldn't be any enemy I cannot talk to. I believe that the people of Zimbabwe have no case against the American people, nor do the people of America have any case against the people of Zimbabwe. This is a question of international relations. If President Trump came here today, when I'm still around, I'll be able to talk to him. I'll be able to make requests from him and say, oh, Mr. President, Zimbabwe is open for business. I know Americans like to play golf. Come and build golf courses at Victoria Falls. Bring American Airlines, Victoria Falls, build hotels. And they'll give you incentives, 5-year incentives for you to do all those things. We are open. Our people would want to catch up with the rest of the region.
What about Britain? Do you want to rejoin the Commonwealth?
Now, one of the major points which the envoy from Prime Minister Theresa May, Mr. Stewart, who came to see me within 1 hour of my inauguration, one of the issues he raised was that Prime Minister May would want to know whether I'll be joining the Commonwealth. My reply was that at the time Zimbabwe left the Commonwealth, it was on the issue of the land reform program, which was unfolding in Zimbabwe at the time, and we differed on that one. But now, as far as we are concerned, the land reform program is behind us. All what is there now is the interrogation of it and say, are there people of multiple farms or on issues of boundaries and so on? But the issue is out. And I believe that most of the Commonwealth countries accept that the program is done. So there is no impediment anymore between us and joining the Commonwealth.
Yes, sorry, we just have a few minutes left, and I want to ask you about the Mugabes, because you've said already that you have, that essentially you're going to leave Mr. Mugabe to live in retirement. What about Mrs. Mugabe, Grace Mugabe? Have you given her immunity from prosecution?
No. We have not given anybody any immunity. What I have promised to my former president and the founding father of our nation, our icon, President Mugabe, is that first we've given him a package, a very lucrative package which I've given him. But above that...
It's reported to be $10 million, is that right?
No, that is in the press.
What is the figure if it's incorrect?
No, there's no figure, but it's a question of he continues to enjoy his salaries, his allowances as before, offices, security, secretariat, things of that nature. Motor vehicles, that's what he could enjoy. Travel by first class. My government will also facilitate him going to Singapore for medical checkup, for medical attention, all those things, including the First Lady. We're going to do that. So, but we're not saying if anybody commits a crime, then the former status will stop the police dealing with that issue. So, but I'm saying that the new administration will do everything possible to make sure the family lives in peace undisturbed. This is what I want.
So where is the accountability then? It's clear that there have been many terrible decisions that have been made, decisions that have brought Zimbabwe to the economic point that of which you're aware and which you've described. So where is the accountability for the past, whether on the part of the Mugabes or others like you who have been in positions of power?
Whether you want us to go back into history and interrogate the past and say, here, X was accountable, X was accountable. My approach is that zero tolerance to corruption. That's the approach I'm making. Zero tolerance to any corruption. No sacred cow in dealing with that. And if you are following what is happening in Zimbabwe today, so many high-profile persons have been brought before the courts. And this is only in less than 2 months. We are already bringing so many people who have committed these crimes. And the list is unending. And also, I think you're aware that I made a 3 months moratorium for those who had taken assets of Zimbabwe outside the country. And I'm glad to say a few days ago, I had a brief from my governor of the Reserve Bank. Said many people who had taken assets outside and funds outside, some have brought back the funds, some are in the process of negotiating, some say, yes, I took out assets, I took out little funds out of the country, but I've invested these funds in buildings in Dubai, some in the UK, and so on. So what do I do? So we say those things can be negotiated properly and quietly. But those who have taken funds outside and do not come forward, I have the list, because the banking fraternity, the financial service sector, has been able to give us who took funds out, and we have that.
Finally, Mr. Mnangagwa, how long do you want people to give you before they judge you on your record? You've only got a few months till elections, but assuming you win that, how long before you are willing to be judged on what you have delivered for Zimbabwe?
It is better to begin judge me on day one, so that I keep awake to my promises and the aspirations of my people. I mustn't be given a sleeping period. They must every day point out to me the areas of weaknesses, grey areas, so that I address them. I'm not an angel. I'll be making mistakes, but I would love to be told the mistakes I make or my administration is making, so we quickly correct such instances.
President Mnangagwa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you again, Mr. Mnangagwa. You're leaving tomorrow, I think.
Yes, I leave tomorrow.
Before President Trump arrives.
See, I would have loved to see the lady,
Mrs. May.
Because Margaret Thatcher was good to us. May is good to us. All the male prime ministers have not been.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.